Unleash the power of your mind. Wear a levity, raw, edgy, humorless apparel for the discriminating activists. Live free or cry. Welcome to another episode of Mind Matters, the talk program that provokes critical thinking, logic, and reason. We encourage all of our listeners to use their common sense in all of their decision making, especially if it involves an issue that you think is important or one that affects your liberties and God-given rights. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Matters here with my co-host, Dan Ploger, and mentor, and myself, John Krotek. And we've got kind of an interesting conversation going on today. As you well know, we do not script these conversations. We kind of, shoot from the hip. And today we're going to talk about unmitigated freedom and the lack of responsibility that we're seeing like everywhere. We're titling this episode Virtues versus Vices, the Responsibility of Freedom. And we've said it many times, Dan. I know we have. I've heard this before, not just from us, but with freedom comes responsibility. And right now, we're seeing anything but responsibility with freedom. We're seeing unmitigated freedom, and it's actually rewarding the 7 deadly sins, if you will, the vices of mankind, humankind, and there's no consequences. We're seeing teachers being challenged. We're seeing parents being challenged. Now, I heard the other day you can sue your parents. Come on, how far do we take this? And then it seems like you get rewarded for being gluttonous or lustful or slothful. Here's a paycheck, go home. You don't need to come into work today. It's madness, pride, envy, wrath, greed, sloth, gluttony, and of course the big one we just said, lust. What do you think, Dan? What's going on, man? Is this a nefarious plan to just destroy humanity, or have humans just gotten out of control with the digital world? I don't know.
That's a good question to think about. I don't know, John. With freedom comes responsibility. And what does that mean? I guess that means if we're going to act free, we have to try and be to provide unfettered information about ourselves and about what we're talking about to others. And I think that falls under the umbrella of authenticity that we hear everybody clamoring about. If you're free, are you obligated to try and tell the truth? Yeah, I think so. I think so. Which means if you try and deceive somebody, you are going against the tenets of freedom. And I think that's true. I think so the issue becomes why, and I think the answer to why is because, number one, people don't understand responsibilities that come with freedom, and secondly, I lost my train of thought. So,
well, you're on a good train because those are some great points. Again, we're seeing a rule of law being challenged. We're seeing human etiquette degrade at levels I've never seen before. People are saying things to people in positions of authority. I mean, I was scared to death of my parents growing up. Didn't mean I didn't go out and, push the envelope. But I mean, if a police officer stopped me, I was going to certainly answer his questions. I wasn't going to get rude and try to run or like you just said, deceive him or her. I think that people don't understand the responsibility of freedom, and it just doesn't mean that you can do whatever the hell you want whenever you want it. And doesn't matter who it hurts. And I don't know, for some reason I think that dystopia just doesn't work in an ordered society. You just can't have conflict and chaos 24/7, which was what I think a lack of responsibility would bring. Just, not to everybody. There's a lot of good Janes and Joes out there that are doing the right thing, that tell the truth, that are integral. But you wouldn't know it from looking on social media or looking at these people in the news that are just outright lying to us. That responsibility of freedom. Some of these news stories, they're lying. So how can you have validity anymore and be, of course, I don't want to digress, but how authenticity, integrity, these virtues, how do you have that in a world that seems to have gone off the rails? What do we need to do, Dan? What's the solution?
Well, I think we had earlier discussions about Facebook, for instance, and the problem with Facebook in the social media in general is there is no accountability. You can make anonymous comments. You can destroy somebody's argument, regardless of how well it's presented. All you have to do is just yell liar, liar, pants on fire, and that seems to get the attention of the press. So the solution, one of our earlier solutions was think, well, instead of using a platform like Facebook, how about a platform like LinkedIn? Because at the time we thought that LinkedIn had one thing that Facebook did not, and that was accountability. But what we're talking about, John, is we're talking about forcing organizations to have morals. And really, the problem lies in the individuals. It's the guy that makes the post. The flammability of some of the words are incredible, but it's the person that makes the post that's causing the problem. And I guess what we have to start doing is recognizing that truth is essential. The attempt to try and speak the truth is really essential for the success of a free society. And if we have governments and people and organizations and people with special causes that are trying to leverage the law to make their own minority opinions something greater than they would otherwise be, like the prosecuting attorney in Atlanta, for example. There's the idea that a woman of that low accomplishment and ilk would ever be able to interrupt a presidential election is beyond the pale. The number one, I don't think the forefathers foresaw that people would be so ugly and mean, but I guess we've shown that to be true. But we're coming down to individual responsibility. How do you make individuals that you never met or that have no accountability to you or to anybody else act responsibly? Sounds to me like maybe we're talking about an exercise in futility, and we need to re-examine the premises upon which we're having this discussion, that something's wrong, something doesn't match up. And I'm not sure what, John, but I'm also not sure. I can see I recognize from our discussion this morning that truth is something that's essential and something we should strive for as freedom-loving people. And that if you espouse lies, you're anti-freedom. But that has very little to do with the 7 cardinal sins that we talked about: wrath, envy, jealousy.
Like wrath, with hate, you've raised some good points. We see you can basically take these 7 deadly sins and you can apply them to things that are going on today. Real briefly, you mentioned LinkedIn. I know of an instance on LinkedIn where a guy had made a post, a veteran, and another veteran challenged him on it. The veteran that made the original post put out something that was misinformation. The veteran who challenged him was trying to right the ship. The first veteran complained to whoever at LinkedIn, and they took the second veteran off. So something's not right there. You talk about something not being right in truth. And then, we experienced on YouTube a channel. I had a whole channel disappear because somebody complained. Everything we did, we followed all the rules. We did all the disclaimers and all of that. And the channel disappeared. We don't know why. It was interesting. It came right after that recent song, country western song, Jason Aldean, Not in My Town, disappeared shortly after that. Of course, so who knows? We haven't done anything dishonest on YouTube. We've been upfront and square and told the listening or viewing audience what we were doing and why, to provoke critical thought, kind of like this show. But so you get back to that, how do you make people responsible? And it does boil down to the individual. But I got to tell you, that is a tall order.
There's freedom for the individual in a civil society is what the Constitution's all about. But freedom within a corporate framework, like LinkedIn, which is really what Google, that those are two different things entirely.
Or Microsoft, Microsoft bought LinkedIn. Remember?
Okay, yeah, so that's all being controlled by people with dials and switches that you have no knowledge of. That's corrupted in itself.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing, and we I think we have said this before, if you're have the authority to allow dishonesty to propagate and you let it, and then when the truth comes about every now and then, and somebody wants to say the truth and you censor the truth, then you go against not only just the tenets of the Constitution or the virtues of the Constitution, but you really go against the tenets of authenticity and humanity. Because I think people want the truth. And if you remember that movie with Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth. Well, I disagree. I think people are smarter than these entities that are controlling the information think they are. And I think it's not up to them to make the decision on what's truthful and what's not. It's up to the individual. So I say, let it fly, let it rip, let the information come out there. And if people give their due diligence, they'll know if something's reliable or something. And I know you love this, Dan, because I know you work on information systems. If something is misinformation or disinformation, or just an outright lie like malinformation, or if it's just noise. I know that you've been working on that piece for information, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Freedom is the ability to be able to decipher for yourself what information is good and what information is bad, and it's not up to anybody to control that. Is that about right?
Yeah, and I think that maybe what we're coming down to in this conversation is that corporations have the right to set their own rules on freedom or lack of freedoms on their platforms, but those platforms do not deserve any form of government protection in any sense. And they do have government protection under the Section 230, where they're effectively immune from any consequences resulting from the use of their platform. So maybe that's our first step. And what we really need to do is to really get focusing on, okay, these guys, we'll grant that Microsoft and Apple and these companies and Disney, they do have a right to lie. And they have a right to limit the amount of speech and what type of information is given across their platforms. But they deserve no protection and no immunity from the government. They need to be as responsible as you or I would be. And you or I should not say because we are broadcasting, as we are. We are responsible for what we're saying, and I accept that responsibility. So maybe we just need to take this one bite at a time. And let's start with taking away any form of immunity we've granted, government protection we've granted any of these platforms, because you can see the corruption, not just the moral hazard for corruption, but the actual resulting moral consequences of giving these platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, all these companies, Microsoft, giving them any form of protection. They don't deserve any governmental protection, and they act against. Well, I think that we came to a good conclusion here, John, that our responsibility as citizens is to try our best to be truthful in what we're trying when we're trying to give information to others.
Yeah, I like that. And you raised a really good point here to close out this conversation. People do have the right to lie in companies, but if they're found to be untruthful and not credible, then I think you know what to do with them. You tune them out, you turn them off. And it doesn't take long to realize which media outlets, which social platforms are censoring the truth. And if the truth can be censored and the lies can be propagated, then we do have a tall order, and we have a lot of work to do as leaders, not only in conversation that people listen to, but in anything that we do. So I would just...
that means that we're dealing with forces that are opposed to freedom. If somebody's deliberately lying to you, they're not acting in the interests of freedom and democracy. And
gosh, and then now you just opened up a whole new conversation. The list of lies is long, and it's not just in not just in our government. I mean, it seems like the list of lies is just it's tremendous everywhere these days, and it takes work. So I would say to anybody out there, don't believe everything that you read, hear, see, smell, touch. Well, I don't know, you can go crazy with that, but give due diligence to anything that if it doesn't feel right, chances are it's not right. If it's too good to be true, chances are it's too good to be true. And if the planet, gosh, we could just take this to so many different realms. All the people making money with the carbon credits. Oh my gosh, the list goes on. The whole racism thing and BLM.
The whole climate change thing. And I think that's probably a good example of misinformation. Absolutely. Mis and disinformation, absolutely to the extreme is the entire climate controversy. We have said earlier in this conversation, if you lie, you're opposed to freedom. Wow. Well, there's no doubt about that. We know where the Greens fit on the scale of socialism, or let's say tyranny versus freedom. We know where that sits. And it's pretty firmly planted on the side of tyranny. So no surprise, the side of tyranny is the side where you find more of these deliberate lies. And I guess that when you see somebody deliberately lying, another responsibility we have to the nation as freedom lovers is to tune those people out and just disregard them. If they've proven to be a liar, tune them out.
Yeah, and it's like, envy, and racism and the BLM mantra that, blacks have been misaligned throughout all of history, and primarily from the whites, right? And how ridiculously stupid is that? I mean, that narrative is just nonsense.
Well, the whole white black narrative is nonsense. I mean, it has no meaning. There's no such thing as a unified block of voters or societal group called blacks. There isn't. There's 1,000 subsets of blacks. There's 1,000 subsets of whites. So the whole discussion, when anybody starts talking about that, as a critical thinker, I would say, beware.
Yeah, well, there you have it. So give due diligence, tell the truth, and mark those people that are lying to you, which will lead us to our next discussion, which I think we'll have a lot of fun with, that victimhood is the new pathogen. Thanks, Dan, for this enlightening conversation, and thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in to another episode of Mind Matters, because your mind matters only if you use it. Be free.
Thanks for the thinker.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Mind Matters. Remember, your mind matters, but only if you use it. Stay alert, stay alive, keep your eyes wide open.